All right, it's showtime. We are live, and welcome to a new episode of Solar Surge Live. We've decided to bring back a weekly live stream show to the channel to make sure that we can keep all of you up to date with everything that's going on in the solar industry. And there's no shortage of things going on. Of course, the story of today is Sunnova. Is Sunnova the next big solar company to collapse? But before we get into the story, I'd like to introduce my co-host. Dan Freshley here is my partner at Solar Surge, also the CEO and founder of Radiant Home Services. So they do solar sales and installation as well as roofing sales and installation. Dan has been an industry veteran for many, many years, at least 8 years in the business, and I've had the privilege to work with him for many of those years. So Dan, it's good to see you. Welcome back to the Solar Surge live stream.
Yeah, it's good to be here, and I apologize in advance if we have a third-party member chiming in from afar. I'm on a little bit of baby duty with my daughter this week, so we might hear some babbles and noises here and there. But anyway, good to be here again with you, Joe.
Yeah, man, and congratulations again. I do miss those years. I kind of don't miss some of the hustle that takes to parent children that age with the diaper bags and everything. But anyway, happy for you. Glad you could join us on the live stream today. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, because the big news of today, the big story this week is Sunnova. The stock price has plummeted to all-time low. And is this the next big solar company to collapse? I think I know the answer to that question, but that is the question of the day. You know, Dan, we've seen a number of high-profile solar business failures over the past 18 months to 24 months, whether it was SunPower, Titan Solar Power. Of course, you had SunPro was bought by ADT, and then ADT shut the business down a couple years later. Dan, what's your take? Why are so many large solar companies failing? What's going on here?
Yeah, complicated question, obviously. I think we all wish we had just the root, cause, the root issue. My gut tells me that as businesses grow, as businesses scale, you're beginning to overextend, get over leveraged into other things. Cost, economic changes. I mean, the big one, if you've read any of the publications, I was on Yahoo Finance earlier and looking into some of this more about Sunnova, is simply over time, just the cost of debt, interest rates rising, other variables like that begin to make it a lot harder to sustain sales. And so what's interesting, I think, with Sunnova in particular, the revenues are actually quite a bit higher. I think it was about 120, might have been even more, $120 million more than it was last year. But their expenses are also growing. Sales are slowing. There's other factors that are playing in there. And when you get over leveraged and overextended in that fashion, it becomes kind of a house of cards. And so we've seen that a lot. We've also seen very creative financing and creative cooking of books and accounting and stuff. Not necessarily from Sunnova, but from other companies in the past. And I think that is what leads people to think, oh, we look really, really solid on paper. Here's our top line revenue. And I just kind of laugh at that, because I think most people know, I wish I could balance my household budget based on top line revenue, right? It's okay. I'll tell all my credit card companies or my mortgage lender, like, oh, don't worry about it. My top line revenue is here. That doesn't matter. What really matters is what the net is. What are you actually clearing? What's actually coming in at the end of the day that you have as free cash to be able to operate with? And so it's interesting. I mean, we've seen this before. Unfortunately, we're going to continue to see it again, not just in this industry, but in all industries. But, that's my quick take on it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get away from just the basic business fundamentals. Is you have to have more money coming in than is going out, so you actually have net at the end of the day. Right. I mean, this is not a magic trick here, right? Like, the business has to produce positive cash flow or you're going to be out of business. So let's go to the report here, because we've got a report here from Canary Media. Let's go ahead and blow this up so everybody can see it better. And basically what's saying is Sunnova reported that their sales were up, and that the company's net losses before income taxes, $448 million last year in 2024. So the business, although sales are growing, the business is losing about $500 million a year, right? So this is not sustainable. And Dan, I've got to say, I felt something was fishy with this years ago, because you remember when you and I were still engaged in the solar sales business, you know that right after NEM3 hit in California, this is going back to like first quarter of 2023. Right, we knew NEM3 was about to hit in California, which means 1-for-1 net metering, that whole solar bill swap exchange, that payback, that whole sort of sales pitch kind of didn't work anymore in an environment where the homeowner could not get 1-for-1 net metering. At the same time, the Federal Reserve was raising interest rates aggressively to combat consumer price inflation. And so we sort of got hit with this perfect storm of, well, the solar doesn't pay back as well for the homeowner. So now the homeowner has to install more solar or add batteries to the solar, which increase the cost. The homeowner now has to pay a higher rate of interest for solar financing. And of course, the dealer fees were also going up as well, which means that again, that just boils down to a higher purchase price for the homeowner, meaning that the solar payback wasn't there. But at the time, I remember we were offering the Sunnova lease as well with some of our dealers or some of our construction partners. And basically the Sunnova lease and other TPO products like that, TPO meaning third-party ownership products, where the homeowner doesn't own directly, they lease it from a leasing company. But they were offering some of these super low monthly payments where from a sales perspective, it made sense. Hey, you can just do solar with a lease. The lease payment is going to be lower than what you're going to save off your electric bill. But something in the back of my head back then was even saying, wait a second. Leasing companies are not in the business of giving money away. They have to borrow money too. So if their cost of capital is going up because interest rates in general are going up, then they also are going to have to pass those costs on in the form of higher prices to homeowners. But it doesn't seem that they did that, Dan. I don't know. I've got more to say on that, but I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I'm reminded of the video that we put out a couple months back regarding Texas Solar and some of the information that kind of played into that conversation as well. And I don't remember all the details off the top of my head, but look, I won't be surprised as well. And I don't know that there's necessarily a spotlight on this today, but I wouldn't be surprised. And I remember the conversation I had with a gentleman that was over there previously, if this new DOGE entity, Department of Government Efficiency, starts kind of digging in a little bit more to some of the difficulties and the things that are actually happening in the solar leasing landscape and stuff, the PPA landscape or the TPO landscape. Because quite frankly, TPO products, homeowners in the end on a TPO product are spending 4 to 5 times the cost for what solar really actually should be. And at the end of the day, I think the big change and the big pivot that I've observed, that I've personally made with my own team at Radiant, and we've advocated for across the industry, is the best way to go solar is to buy it free and clear, pay cash. And if you can't go cash, utilizing financing options with no dealer fees, attractive interest rates, I'll kind of asterisk that because obviously interest rates are variable today, and it's going to depend, based on market conditions. But that's the way I recommend, going solar. I don't know, Joe, your thoughts?
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you're always going to get the best deal. You're always going to get the best deal if you finance the purchase of your solar power system yourself, if you can pay cash with it. Second to that would be to work with a traditional FDIC insured bank lender that's not going to charge you any additional dealer fees and all these sort of, loan origination fees and all the extra stuff that the solar loan companies throw on top of it. But just a simple, transparent bank loan at a competitive interest rate where you know exactly what your monthly payment is going to be. And that's actually just a great time to mention one of our sponsors, Climate First Bank, that believes in transparent and ethical solar financing, where you can apply directly as a homeowner, apply directly to the lender. You know exactly what your interest rate is going to be, exactly what your monthly payment is going to be. And if you did want to apply some incentives like a tax credit or make a one-time additional pay down, they let you do that as well at any time to lock in a lower monthly payment. But when you get into some of these solar loans where they tack on the hidden fees, or some of these solar leases where you don't really own the system, you don't get the tax credit, and then a lot of times with these leases, they put in an escalator, so the monthly payment goes up each year, maybe 2 or 3%. Ideally, it's not as high as the electric rate is going up, but still, if you have a lease with an escalator, your monthly payment on year one can be very different than what your monthly payment is going to be 10 or 20 years in the future. So,
yeah, I mean, one of the things that I find interesting on that conversation too, there, Joe, is like, imagine if we hadn't seen utility rate increases like we've seen over the past couple of years, right? As we've seen economic circumstances change in solar, economic change in general, interest rates. If we didn't have rising utility costs, I mean, I love the solar industry and I believe in it for much more than just about bill swap conversations, but the economics of solar would be absolutely horrible if utility rates hadn't continued to climb, but we still had the same economic pressures and interest rate increases, that we've seen. So I don't know. It's interesting. It is concerning. But zoom out. It's not all doom and gloom. I think the bigger part of this, I hope we're beginning to see a little bit of a consolidation back to the local regionalized mom and pop installers, because they're the best ones to work with, I think, at the end of the day. The ones that haven't bitten off more they can chew, that are really well established and connected to their local community or to their local region, rather than these large national, high volume installers, and that's it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Dan, it looks like we have a couple of questions coming in here. So I'm going to put the first one up on the screen from Smash Toshi, who says, solar has more scammers and criminals than crypto. Such a shame for both industries. So much fundamentals being thrown out with the bathwater. And Smash Toshi, thank you for that comment. By the way, guys, we do have the comments coming in live here on the dashboard. So if you're out there watching this live, put a comment on the YouTube stream, or if you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn, put a comment. We'll get it up on the screen here. And if you have a question, we'll do our best to get you an answer as well. But thank you for that comment. Yeah, I mean, like Dan was saying earlier, I mean, solar is going through a bit of a sort of a washing out phase right now. A lot of the companies that were, frankly, Ponzi schemes, companies that required for sales to constantly be growing for the business to actually stay afloat. A lot of those companies have gone out of business and fallen by the wayside now. Again, we've mentioned a couple of the large companies that have gone bust in the last 18 months, like Titan and SunPower. And I think that's going to continue to happen. And on the other end of this shakeout is going to be a stronger, more resilient, more sustainable solar industry. Again, that's why I think traditional solar bank financing with an FDIC insured bank, as opposed to these exotic solar financing schemes, where many of these solar financing schemes assume that the leasing company is going to be able to capture and monetize these government incentives and tax credits. In other words, the lease revenue itself, whatever the monthly payments that the customer is making themselves, isn't enough to actually cover the business's cost of operating, especially when you factor in that the leasing company is on the hook for O&M for the system. In other words, the long-term operations and maintenance of the system, if you're a homeowner with a leased solar system on your roof, well, technically it's not your system. It's not your responsibility to fix it if it breaks. It's the leasing company's responsibility to fix it, because they're typically on the hook for guaranteeing that system is going to produce a certain amount of electricity over time. But again, if they're cutting their prices below cost and they don't actually have an adequate cash reserve to service those ongoing operation and maintenance expense, then the company goes bust. And that appears what's happening here with SunPower. We're going to get more into the article here, is what's going on with SunPower, but it appears that that's what's happening here. And so what's going to happen to these hundreds of thousands of homeowners with these abandoned lease systems on their roof? And inevitably, some of those systems are going to require repairs. And is SunPower going to be there, or are they going to have somebody to actually send out there to fix those solar panels and make sure all that stuff is working? Or are these systems going to be abandoned? I don't know. But Dan, I'll give it over to you.
Yeah, it's a big concern. The one comment that had just came in here as well, and I apologize, I'm not sure if you were already talking on this, but TFP said pay cash for a solar company that won't be there in 5 years. Well, I mean, again, look, I think at the end of the day, you have to determine for yourself why it is that you're going solar. I know for me, what got me into it, and largely what got you into solar, was about energy independence. It was about having control of my own power, having backup power for emergency circumstances. So for me, it wasn't really about this like contingency of I've got to have this economically performing for me. It was I want it for peace of mind. And so, yeah, if something happened to my original solar company and then something happens to my equipment, that stinks that I don't have somebody easily to call and contact to repair it. But I was committed to solar for different reasons. I'll figure it out. I'll hire some other company. You could bring in another company like a solar insurer that now has their solar detect program, I think it was called, where they'll hire someone within their network to come in and service and maintain and operate that system for you. So there are some options out there for those types of situations. But again, I think making the decision on who you go solar with is very, very important. And frankly, what might have been true when I first got into the industry, or even 5 years ago, where it's like, oh yeah, you want to work with SunPower, you want to work with Titan, you want to work with some of these biggest names in the industry. Well, all these giants have seemed to fall. And the ones that I know that have really done well and stuck around are the regional companies. Like I said, the ones that have built good reputations in local markets, just like you might have a great local HVAC company or a great local roofer, or great local, you name the home service. There's plenty of those great local solar companies as well, or great regional solar companies. Those are the ones I would look to be going solar with if I was doing it today.
Yep, no, totally agree with you. And I know we've said that in the past. The most reliable long-term solar installers seem to be the smaller regional companies. They focus on one or two states or one or two metro areas. If you're talking about a really large state like California, and just establishing a good reputation, a good pipeline of referral business coming in, and just maintaining that good reputation. By the way, oftentimes these are not going to be the lowest priced solar contractors, right? All right, these ones are typically going to be priced in the middle of the range, or maybe even on slightly on the higher end of the range. But what you're investing in, of course, is that long-term reliability that the contractor is going to be here in 5 years and beyond. All right, I'd like to switch back over here and let's dig more into the Sunnova article here. So it looks like just last month, the company laid off 300 employees, or about 15% of its workforce. And basically the CEO says they are not going to have enough cash coming in this year to meet their forecasted expenses this year. So what are they doing to stay afloat right now? Well, it looks like they just took out, let's just call it a payday loan. So according to Sunnova's investor website here, let's see here.
I believe it's in that site. There's also loan. Or I know they took, it was like 185.
Yeah, I saw $185 million. I think that's actually up here on the headline. Let's look at the headline. Yeah, signed a $185 million non-recourse asset-based loan facility providing additional working capital. So basically they went out and they borrowed $185 million to keep the doors open. But
well,
if you go down here,
it doesn't say it right there, Joe, but I believe I saw this on Yahoo Finance. I'm looking for it exactly. But I believe they also took that loan at about a 15% interest rate, which...
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. That's exactly where I was going to next. So if you scroll all the way down to the fine print here, where it talks about the loan, the terms of the loan agreement, this facility bears an interest rate at 15%. So this is a hard money loan. I mean, this is a payday loan essentially. And as the saying goes, if you don't have it this payday, you're probably not going to have it next payday.
Yeah.
And so they're paying a, basically, subprime rate of interest for this facility. And if I'm reading this correctly, the security or the collateral for this loan is the actual membership interest in the company. In other words, it is the company, the equity, the ownership of the company itself. So I don't know if the lender or the lenders in this case, it looks like Wilmington Trust NA is the agent here, but there are many lenders as party to this agreement. I'm not sure if these lenders ever intend to get paid back, or if they intend to take over the company because they know a default is inevitable over time. Again, I'm not sure. I'm just speculating here. I'm pulling this information directly off of Sunnova's investor website. But Dan, what's your take? What's your take on how all this shakes out?
I mean, my take, the short and dirty of it, is run away, right? Like, if you have someone, I'll say it two different ways. Homeowners watching, if someone's pitching you Sunnova, stay away from it. Salespeople selling Sunnova, you got to really look, I think, in the mirror and figure out, like, is that, why are you selling the product, right? Why is that the option you're working with? Why is that the option, you're leading with? Does it fit a unique need that homeowner has? Chances are there's probably other products out there that can do better. Again, I mean, there's not many times, we've been pretty open about this and talked about it before, but there's not many times that I would ever, frankly, propose leasing a solar system or TPO type scenarios. Mainly just because at the end of the day, I want to own it. I want the tax incentive that goes with it. Now, that would be maybe the one and only kind of speculation or like asterisk to that statement is if you do not qualify for the tax credits, you don't have high enough, tax liability, you're at your older age, whatever it might be, that leads you to not have the tax, liability associated with getting the credit, then maybe the lease makes sense. But I don't know. Frankly, I would even say, should you really be going solar if that's the case? Like, you got to make common sense, wise financial decisions, and that's part of it. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I do truly, I mean, I do hate seeing this for our industry because every single time another big name company fails, it creates this echo in media and this echo in the sentiment of, oh, solar is bad, solar is bad, solar is bad. And that's just not true. It's not the case. There's a ton of good, whether it be emergency backup, financial independence opportunities, energy independence, environmental, that make solar a very needed and I believe a very future forward thing. But we're all getting a little bloodied in this, and for those of us that have been in the industry for a long time, it's frustrating. It really is.
Yep. Well, Dan, I know we don't have too much time remaining on the live stream here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about your takeaways from InterSolar 2025. So folks who are watching out there, Dan and I spent all of last week in San Diego, California for the InterSolar North America and Energy Storage North America conference, where a lot of the manufacturers were introducing new products or announcing upgrades or expansions to their product line. So Dan, I'll just pose it to you first. What were some of your big takeaways from InterSolar 2025? What stuck with you best?
Yeah, I think similar to what we've seen back at RE Plus in the late summer, fall, and really the past 18 to 24 months. Common themes have continued to be convergence on single platform, right? A lot of manufacturers are aspiring to build, if they're a battery manufacturer, maybe they're releasing their own inverters, their own microinverters. The idea simply would be that you would have everything: inverter, battery, possibly system monitoring, bi-directional charging capabilities, maybe to come in the future, all in one single platform. And I like the idea behind that. So we saw a lot of that at InterSolar. I think, as we walked the floor and talked with different companies and did videos with different companies, I think the one product that maybe stood out to me the most is Franklin WH's new A-Power S, I believe it is, battery that is, soon to come later part of this year. I think that's going to be a really formidable competitor to sort of that all-in-one cabinet, sleek design look to Tesla Powerwall 3. Really similar performance capabilities. Franklin's obviously really taken the industry by storm as far as product goes, and there's a lot of people using their product. Their A-Power 2 battery and their original A-Power were great products. And so I think the A-Power S is a pretty fascinating new product. We'll have more content coming on that on the channel later on, but just for a quick tour and video, if you guys go back on our YouTube channel and go to a YouTube short, we recorded one that Joe did a quick walkthrough of some of the products that Franklin unveiled at InterSolar. So that I think was pretty fascinating. Aside from that, I think the battery space is super competitive. There's a lot of companies that are maybe well known in other parts of the world, whether it's Asia, Europe, could be Africa, Australia, that are trying to get into the US market. I mean, the one thing that us US solar people kind of fail to understand is like battery storage and these complexities of this stuff is massive in other parts of the world. And we're really just kind of getting started here in the US. So there is a ton of opportunity still. Obviously, there's a little bit of economic uncertainty and it's going to take a lot for companies to succeed here, but we're really just getting started. So I think that's pretty fascinating when it comes to the battery, world. But yeah, Joe, I mean, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I would agree with you. I think if I had to pick one product that stuck out the most, it was the new Franklin A-Power S, the AC and DC coupling capable solar inverter and battery solution. Obviously, Franklin is a product and a brand that we've covered on the Solar Surge channel for many years now, and the fact that they have a functionally direct and I would say functionally superior rival to Tesla Powerwall, and the fact that simple, clean installation. You can bring your high voltage solar directly to the battery inverter. But also, of course, Franklin offers a couple of features that Tesla just does not, including intelligent load control built into the system, as well as generator support, which I've always been saying is important for someone who's truly off grid or truly preparing for a loss of the electric grid long term. You need to have some kind of a fuel burning generator option to back up your solar. And I guess Tesla, maybe just philosophically, they just don't want to do anything with fossil fuels, and that's why they're not doing it. But I think it's a necessary thing for somebody who lives 100% off grid. You know what I'm talking about. And so I think the new Franklin A-Power S, if I had to pick one product that I'm most excited about, is that's probably going to be the one. Now, I want to go back to the issue of the of the Sunnova collapse, which was the main topic of today's broadcast. I just got a note here from a senior executive from one of the top solar warranty and service companies. And here's what he had to say. The writing has been on the wall for unsustainable TPO models. Again, TPO means third-party ownership, that's what we would call a leased system, where the homeowner doesn't own the system directly. It's owned by a third party, and then typically that third party can get some tax credits or incentives. But he says the writing has been on the wall for unsustainable TPO models, high cost of sales, mounting service obligations. Again, they own long-term repair, and razor-thin margins were never built to last. As stock prices fall and companies struggle, the impact is hitting contractors, suppliers, and homeowners the hardest. The industry needs a shift, one that prioritizes long-term stability, true energy ownership, and financial security. Contractors who diversify beyond TPO and focused on sustainable service-backed solutions will be the ones who not only survive, but thrive in the next era of solar. And so again, this is from a senior executive at one of the top solar warranty and service companies. I'm not going to say him by name, but I appreciate your insights on this as we had the broadcast coming on urgently today. So yeah, again, it goes back to the fundamentals though, long-term sustainability, right? Like the companies have to make money. They have to make money, and they can't only make money if there's some new future sales always coming in, right? They have to make money based on the sales and the projects that they have today. I mean, otherwise all you have is a Ponzi scheme. Right, the only thing keeping the thing going is that you have more suckers coming in, or whatever, more sales coming in. But if each one of those sales is not profitable in and of itself, is not financially sustainable in and of itself, then you have a Ponzi scheme or a house of cards, and it can't last long term. I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah. Again, it's ugly. It's not good for the industry. And so again, I go back to a question you asked earlier, Joe, about how do I think this shakes out? And I made the comments of, hey, if you're homeowners, stay away from them. If you're salespeople, I think I don't want to call it, it's not an ethical thing, right? I'm not insinuating that like you're ethically violating it, but I think you need to put your best foot forward to say like, what truly is going to be the best option for this homeowner, aside from how I can earn, or aside from the easiness of the sale. Like I get it, right? The TPO products, the idea is you don't have to come out of pocket any money. You can do these payment swaps. It makes it a very like basic level sale. I get it, but be a professional salesperson, challenge yourself a little bit more, build value, articulate that value, and sell a loan product, right? Where they are not getting ripped off by these house of card type companies or these excessively high dealer fees. And, again, that's traditional sales in many ways. So I digress. One thing I wanted to just make sure we kind of put out there for everybody, tuning in as well, continue to drop any comments. One thing that Joe and I are considering doing as we kind of relaunch this live stream is even maybe the possibility of taking in live calls or live, comments, get people sort of on the channel like you've maybe seen on other broadcasts. For now, before we have that capability, we are going to keep paying attention to as many of the comments as they roll in. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can, as we see them come in. But appreciate all the interactions and comments that have come in so far as well.
Yeah, Dan, looks like we have a couple more comments and questions coming in. I'm going to put one up on the screen here from Los Donoso. He's asking, does Franklin include load control beat Tesla Powerwall with span? I guess that's a matter of opinion. I know Franklin took kind of like a let's keep it simple approach, where Franklin's load control is built right into their gateway. Again, pretty much every solar power battery backup system has some sort of a transfer switch. Some of them call it the gateway, some of them call it the system controller. But basically, Franklin built their smart kits right into the A gate. And their approach was, look, let's just take the two largest loads, the two largest loads in the house. Chances are those are going to be the ones that need to be controlled during a grid outage. So that might be it's your electric vehicle charger. Maybe that's your air conditioning compressor, your HVAC compressor, or maybe it's your electric water heater or electric clothes dryer. So if you just identify the two heaviest loads and you can control those, then you should be able to stretch your battery runtime during a blackout without having to rewire your entire electrical panel and moving all your circuits around. Now, on the other hand, if you do a Tesla Powerwall battery with span, Well, with span, you're basically completely replacing your electrical panel or panels. So it does allow you to monitor and control more circuits, but at the cost of a more costly, more complex installation. Again, you're basically completely replacing your circuit breaker panel, which means every single circuit in your house will have to get relanded, and it's just more work for the electrician to do.
Yeah, absolutely. One other question here, Joe, from a little bit earlier on. Creative Experiment said, why not put a battery in your house first instead of your car? Tesla avoids your warranty using it as a backup generator off grid, which I believe they're referring to trying to do bi-directional with the battery system. That's obviously something we've talked a lot about and covered. Had a recent video that came out regarding PointGuard's successful deployment and some testing of their bi-directional. But yeah, I mean, look, the first part of this question, why not put a battery in your house first, I think is also very dependent on where you're located, because there's certain places where having solar plus battery or just the battery system to go with it is really paramount to the economics of this working correctly. I think of places like California, Hawaii, could be parts of Arizona, some East Coast states and stuff as well, where, you know, again, because of lack of net metering policies and higher energy costs, you need to store that energy locally. And so, yeah, it would make more sense to have a battery in your house first. Now, for you and I, Joe, here on the East Coast, I'm in Virginia, you're in South Carolina, our energy costs are I'll call them cheap enough. But more importantly, our net metering policies are still the old school 1-for-1. And so the battery, purely just for economics, is not as valuable for us. We don't need to use it. And in fact, I would actually argue the other way around. If you're doing solar purely for economics, having a battery and using it for nighttime storage and then usage is a worse economic route, because the more you cycle it, the sooner you're going to go through the battery and the sooner you're going to have to replace it. So in that particular case, I'm pretty excited. Again, I believe in battery backup because I want energy independence. But for those that don't necessarily care about it to that extent, but want backup power if and when they lose power, bi-directional is a really exciting capability. And there's difficulty about that. I mean, we spoke with another executive from one of the big brands about the issues as to why this has not successfully been, you know, mainstream deployed yet. And it's because you have to get auto manufacturers like Tesla or General Motors or Ford or whoever to buy into how these things work together. And then you got to consider, like, the warranty they were putting on their vehicle batteries. They weren't intending originally for it to be used for backup power for a house as well. So now how are they rating cycles? It's a different complexity. But yeah, so I mean, I think that that's a really cool concept, and I hope it's out soon. But I think the answer to that question is it depends on what market you're in. But shoot, I would advocate for putting the battery in at your house first anyways. But that's just my personal, you know, perspective and opinion as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the simple answer to that question is that, you know, solar home batteries are still expensive. And so if you already have an electric vehicle and you've already made that investment in an electric vehicle, you're not going to find any cheaper storage if you just look at it on a dollar per kilowatt hour basis. You know, your electric vehicle battery is a tremendous value. And so it'd be nice to be able to tap into that for emergency backup purposes. It's actually a really timely question too, because last Friday I spent the whole day in Los Angeles doing a Tesla Cybertruck bi-directional install. So what they call power share. So it's not that Tesla's not going to support this functionality at all. They're just being cautious with how they roll it out and then how much of the battery they allow you to use for backup purposes. But right now, the Tesla Cybertruck does have the power share feature, where essentially you can plug in your Cybertruck and use that as a backup power source for your house when the grid is down. Hopefully in the future, you can interface it with solar so you can recharge the Cybertruck from solar panels in the case you have an extended outage and you need multiple days of backup power. But Dan, I think you also touched on PointGuard recently had a successful test doing 3 different brands of electric vehicles with their bi-directional system. So they tested the F-150 Lightning, they tested the Rivian R1T, as well as the Mercedes-Benz EQB. And in each case, they were able to power the whole home using backup power being drawn out of the electric vehicle. And in a couple of cases, they were actually able to use one vehicle to power the house and charge another vehicle simultaneously. So folks, this technology is really getting to the point where the rubber's about to hit the road. And I know that this is a topic that we've had a lot of interest over the past couple of years. A lot of the companies have talked about it, whether it's Enphase, SolarEdge, PointGuard, they just had their successful test, Tesla, of course. So I think once the auto manufacturers and the solar equipment manufacturers can work out what the standards and limits and warranties are going to be, I think the technology is ready to go. And I know consumers are really looking forward to get their hands on it. Myself personally, I definitely would like to have that bi-directional setup in my next home.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I mean, we've talked about it, almost kind of feels like a broken record, right? Like it's been talked about a lot, but I do think it's one of the most exciting, true new innovations, in the industry. I mean, I think it goes back maybe maybe even 3 years now where, Enphase began talking about it and SolarEdge, and then, came along all the other brands and stuff as well. But I think it's really cool as someone who's owned multiple electric vehicles and owns one today. Again, the conversations we've had often is like, look, the battery sitting in your average EV, and I'll say that with a grain of salt, depending on what it is, but it's probably around 100 kilowatt hours, maybe 80, 90 kilowatt hours. Now, you're not going to be able to use all of that for the bi-directional, experience. But even if you could use 50% of that, right, that's essentially like saying, hey, I've got 4-ish Tesla Powerwall 3s, but in one vehicle that I was probably already going to have parked in my garage or in my driveway. And now I can deploy it for backup purposes. If you live in an area, maybe coastal Florida, Southeast, United States, hurricane came through. It could be in California with, things that we saw with the wildfires or with, rolling blackouts or grid, instability. So again, I think it's just another level of redundancy, another capability that's technologically really cool and exciting. And so we'll continue to keep everybody updated on that, and more content will be definitely coming out on our channel as we work through, some of the manufacturers we've got relationships with, doing more testing.
Absolutely. I got another question that just came in here from Lamont Seltzer, who's asking, what is the rumored timeline for bi-directional wall box integration with Generac Power Cell? Thanks for the question, Lamont. I don't have any specific information as far as when Generac is going to be introducing a bi-directional feature. Of course, Generac has just rolled out their new second generation Power Cell 2 battery, which is an AC coupled battery. So don't have any specific information yet on if they're going to do a bi-directional EV charger to interface with Power Cell 2, or if there's an EV charger upgrade option that will interface with the original DC coupled Power Cell 1. But we'll continue to keep an eye out. And by the way, of course, that's why Dan and I go to these conferences, to make sure that we can stay up to date with all the latest solar technology and product information. And of course, be able to share that information with you. And of course, now we are back with the weekly live stream show like this, so that we can bring you the latest information in real time, as well as be able to take your questions and comments and be able to get feedback to you in real time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Dan, anything else? Yeah, anything else that you'd like to cover while we still have a little bit of time here on the live stream? I know we talked about the Sunnova collapse. That's the big news of the day, is that it appears that Sunnova's collapse is imminent. They just took out a loan to be able to keep the doors open for the next few months or maybe a year. But just from what I've seen, the terms on that financing looks to me that the lenders intend to take over the company, not that the company really has an ability to pay them back. So we'll continue to keep on top of that story, keep you guys updated. Of course, InterSolar 2025 just wrapped up. So be sure to tune into the channel. We're going to have dozens of videos coming out from the InterSolar show with new products and product updates. And so, of course, we're excited to share that with you all, including, for example, the new Franklin A-Power S battery. We'll have a video about that shortly. And, of course, PointGuard with their bi-directional EV charger. Also, we got a ton of content from EG4's new products. EG4 is launching about 6 new products in 2025. And I know you all have been asking me to do more reviews and more coverage of EG4. So we listen to you. We've got a lot of content on EG4 coming out in the very near future. So stay tuned for that as well.
Yeah. I just saw a comment that came in from Carlos, and I was actually going to go to your original comment here before, Carlos. So apologies, we hadn't gotten to it yet. But Carlos was just asking battery versus generator. My client got quoted $17,000 all in for a 26 kilowatt Generac generator. Would 3 Franklins be equivalent? Would the net cost be equivalent also? This is obviously a hard question to answer, especially on a YouTube type platform, live stream platform, because look, the reality of it is that when installers are buying their product, number one, they're buying product from their distribution network. So there's, the various distributors, and the relationship and the price that they have versus another installer can vary. And then even that distributor's pricing that they have with the manufacturer can vary. So it's really dependent on who the installer is, what region, what market. There are different variables there. What I would say, generally speaking, my personal experience has been, is that battery systems are often going to be more expensive initially. I wouldn't say that it would be, necessarily double or 2.5 times the cost, but it's probably going to be more expensive than the generator option on the front end. Now, that's obviously before you factor in different variables like maybe the tax credit eligibility on the battery system. And it's certainly not accounting for the holistic outlook on a generator when you've got fuel cost, maintenance plans, and possibly shorter life span out of the generator than you might have out of the battery system. So that's kind of what I've always seen over the years, is when I do those equations and I run them kind of side by side, generator, more power, more output, and lower upfront initial price, but with ongoing related costs and expenses, where the battery system might cost more, but holistically speaking, probably nets out to be a better economic investment. But then again, our perspective as well is I recommend both, but that's a little bit different, right? That's a different sort of thought process and ideology about preparedness and off grid and having that capability. But Carlos, hopefully that helps answer the question. I would expect that the cost will be higher on the battery system up front, but net to be a better holistic investment long term, which is why it's also important how long that client depends on being in the home. If they know this is a forever home, then I would say battery is the way to go. If they think they're maybe only going to be there 5, 7, 10 years, then generator might be the better way to go for that time frame. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, Joe.
No, Dan, I think you hit it exactly, hit the nail on the head. The generator slightly cheaper on day one, but if you consider, some of these larger whole home generators, you can burn $100 worth of fuel a day. You're running that generator all day, the price of propane. So, consider the ongoing fuel cost for the generator. Not to mention, it's like having another car to maintain. So you're going to do an oil change. A lot of times the generator company will sign you up on like an annual maintenance plan. Sometimes they wrap it into the cost, or sometimes they may charge you an extra $300 to $500 per year, where they'll come out, they'll do the oil change, they'll check the air filter, they'll check the spark plugs, they'll make sure that generator is functioning properly. But again, all that adds up. So if you add up your lifetime fuel cost as well as your lifetime maintenance cost for the generator on top of the initial install cost, I think you're going to find it nets out to about the same as what the cost of a battery system would be after the tax credit is applied, assuming you can get the tax credit. But the nice thing about the batteries is that they're set it and forget it. There's virtually no moving parts on the battery. So there's no like maintenance to perform on the battery. There's a computer that controls the battery, but there's no mechanical moving parts that you have to maintain or replace. And so I think in that sense, it's just a much, much better peace of mind, and it's completely silent when it's operating. So you don't have to worry about, with the generator running all night or whatever, or losing power all night.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest pros, is just that you don't realize how quiet or how noisy a generator is when you have kind of two of them side by side. I've got a good friend of mine, different case scenario, but owns a local coffee, company near me. And he powers his entire mobile coffee truck when he goes to festivals and events, all from a battery system, solar panel, portable deployed battery system. He uses the EcoFlow Delta Pro Ultra system. And it was funny. We were at an event where he had his truck here, and there was a barbecue truck right across the way with a traditional, probably Honda 5,000 or 7,000 watt generator. And just the noise difference was pretty stark. And the same thing applies on these larger systems, but maybe not to the same extent, but you'll definitely hear it.
Yep.
Joe, one question that just kind of came to mind, and this is something I'm keeping pretty close attention on, but I just wanted to get your input on it. Figured let's talk about it. There's been a lot of speculation and concerns about the tax credit, right? That's a big thing. Is digging into things, new administration, some speculation around what's going to happen, and I definitely don't know all the answers. And I think anybody that says they did would be lying. But do you have any initial thoughts or impressions on maybe those that are considering going solar in 2025, they've got concern or uncertainty about what the tax credit scenario might look like into the future. Well, again, this is your speculation and opinion. What do you think that shakes out to look like?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I know a lot of folks are talking about the current political environment being a challenge for the solar industry. I mean, if we go back to the first Trump administration, towards the end of Trump's first term, they did begin to sunset the investment tax credit. So it was basically sort of scheduled to phase out over 3 years and then go away. Right now, the 30% investment tax credit is kind of the kicker that makes the economics of solar work for a lot of people. If you're just looking at it as far as, I don't want to do any money down, I just want to finance the system and have the system pay for itself. Being able to get that 30% tax credit is, in a lot of cases, is what makes the math pencil out. But I think big picture from what I'm reading from the administration is they want a solar industry that can more stand on its own, where the industry is not so dependent, and where companies like this SunPower, which is now on not SunPower, but Sunnova, which is now on shaky ground, so dependent on the subsidies and the tax credits for the business model even to work. I think they want a more resilient solar industry that can stand on its own and participate in more traditional competitive market dynamics with other energy sources. By the way, Dan, you mentioned something earlier, which I think is worth digging into a little bit more, which is that some of these solar leasing companies, whether it's Sunnova or the Texas Green Lease company that we had reported on last year, that a lot of these leasing companies are dependent on being able to capture the tax credit, but a lot of it, from what I'm being told from insiders, is that they have to capture the tax credit at a much inflated price of what the system actually costs. So let's say, for example, you buy your solar system from a contractor and the cash price is $25,000, right? And you could pay the contractor $25,000 and that's it. And then $25,000, 30% of that would be your tax credit, or that'd be about $7,500 if my math is correct. Okay, but what I'm understanding some of these leasing companies are doing, solar leasing companies, is instead of taking the $25,000 cost of construction, they're taking what's the total of lease payments over the entire 25-year lease and calling that's the cost of the system, and then taking 30% of that. So what would have been a $25,000 solar system is now a $75,000 solar system. And so the company is getting, let's say, 3 times the cash value of the tax credit. But again, I know you mentioned perhaps that's part of what DOGE is doing, is looking at some of these policies and terms. I read something about perhaps the Department of Energy appointing or providing guidance to the IRS to make sure that the IRS's tax credit loopholes are not being taken advantage of, where the IRS agents may not even understand what they're looking at, but a solar industry and energy industry insider knows that, yeah, a $25,000 cash system or finance system could translate to $75,000 worth of lease payments. Doesn't necessarily mean that the lease company should get triple the amount of tax credit than the bank would or a cash customer would. Your thoughts on it?
It's the difference between a $7,500 tax credit and a $22,500 tax credit. Now multiply that out over thousands of systems. You wonder where we wonder where millions, billions of dollars is going. Well, that's just one piece of that, thing in the tax credit side. So that to me is concerning. That goes back to some of the earlier onset conversation about Sunnova and TPO products and leases and stuff of that sort. I think as far as the tax credit goes as well, there is some concern, obviously, about what the future is going to look like, what DOGE's involvement in this is, and how things are going to change. The only thing to me that and I'm trying to draw conclusions and bring things together, that my speculation on the tax credit is I don't think it goes away, but we might see some real pull back the curtain on the things that are happening. And the reason I don't think it goes away is, one, the Trump administration, at least, although they did allow it to sunset previously from 30% to 26% back in 2020, I believe it was also into 2021 supposed to go from 26% to 22%. And I think at the time there was the COVID relief bill, whichever one it was, that under the Trump administration then extended the 26% to go forward for another handful of years. And then it was, of course, the IRA bill that the Biden administration passed that returned back to the 30% level that we're under right now, and is supposed to be remaining at that level for 10 years from when that bill was passed. I guess what I'm saying there is they didn't try to do away with the credit. They actually extended it at that time, albeit not at the value that it's at today. I think the other part of it, though, too, is generally, if you're looking at conservative politics, it's very pro-business, very pro-economic growth, very pro-jobs and employment. And whether Trump and any of his associates have targets on renewable energy and EVs and stuff, almost like they're out to get them, I still think that that's a sector that long-term, I think there probably is some belief in, and hey, we want to be energy independent. I know he's been infamous for his drill baby drill lines, but at the end of the day, too, energy independence is more than just drilling. It's about having alternative. It's about having nuclear, too. I mean, that's another conversation and topic. But I don't know. We'll see about that. My other speculation, at least for anyone considering going solar in 2025, is I think it would be fairly unprecedented for the IRS to roll back an incentive retroactively with inside of a year that we're already in. In other words, people have been going solar since January the 1st under the current policies that are in place right now today. And so if I went solar on January 10th, expecting to get my credit for 2025, and then come to find out that the IRS kind of did a rug pull on me and said, oh, no, that doesn't apply for 2025, I don't imagine that going over properly. So my speculation is that in 2025, you would be covered. If anything changes, it would be changing into effect for 2026 and maybe the years beyond. So all that to say, I think if you're considering it, if you've got the right contractor, if you've done your homework, now's the time to pull the trigger. Particularly now that we're still in the earlier part of the year. I love when I can help people have systems up and running by March the 1st, because in most markets, March the 1st and beyond is when production starts getting really, really good. So the sooner your system is installed, the better experience you're going to have for the calendar year of 2025 and beyond. So just something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think that's probably a good time for us to wrap up this live stream broadcast. Again, folks, we've reintroduced the weekly live stream to make sure that we can keep you up to date on everything that's changing in the solar industry. And frankly, Dan, it seems that there's always something to report on every week. It's not really been not much of a dull moment here in the solar industry the last year and a half, 2 years. Of course, the topic of today's broadcast, the main topic was Sunnova. Is Sunnova the next large solar company to collapse? Again, appears to be one of these business models that is dependent on government incentives and tax credits, and potentially inflating the value of tax credits for the business model to actually be profitable. And we're seeing a lot of that shake out now. But we'll continue to stay on top of this topic for you folks. Again, we do take your questions in real time. So if you have a question, just put a comment on the YouTube video, or if you're on LinkedIn, you can post a comment there as well, Facebook, and we can put it up on the display here and get you an answer in real time. Maybe in the future, we'll take real-time calls or real-time video calls in as well during the live stream. But that pretty much does it for this broadcast, and we thank you for spending some more time on the Solar Surge channel. This has been Solar Surge Live, and until next time.